Integrationism is the historic movement which was occurring through this sort of post-Reformation and Puritan era, which called for a dialectic reconciliation of scripture, nature, and reason woven together by investigation and scholarship. So it was the idea of integrating all knowledge. By the way, that's where the term university comes from. The term university, uni, right, one, means something that brings together all knowledge under one reality and one truth. Today, there are almost no universities left. They're all multiversities, okay? They're not universities anymore, they're multiversities. And that one idea, that one centralized, unifying idea is God and His Word. All of the first universities were Christian universities. The concept of the university is a Christian concept, okay? There was a rejection of, number one, fideism, which is basing truth on blind faith with the exclusion of reason. There was a rejection of that, all right? This idea that Christians would eschew knowledge, that we would run away from knowledge, we would run away from investigation, that was rejected. And rationalism, basing truth on reason to the exclusion of revelation. There was a rejection of both of these ideas. The Puritans saw that all the arts and sciences reveal theology included, synthesized into a comprehensive view of truth based on the circle of knowledge leading to what they called eupraxia, the practice of right living. Their idea was that the goal was that the student would walk uprightly, that the student would live righteously. Not just that the student would pass exams, not just that the student would be smart, but that the student would live rightly, that idea of eupraxia. Technometry was really the implementation of this. And the grand vision of Veritas, which was still the motto of Harvard today, the divine truth in the mind of God, was the discovery and integration of all truth through scholarship and vocation, resulting in the practice of right living. Now, Harvard's motto hasn't always just been Veritas or truth, but it was truth for God and His kingdom. Now the motto is just truth. The circle of knowledge, let's look at this. What's at the center of education? Today, this is what we believe, that the pupil or the student is at the center of education. This is from David Scott. Each vocation is faculty or applied use of one or more of these disciplines. Because humankind was created in the image of the divine artist, the vocations allow the human being to participate in the ongoing divine master plan of creation. Vocation functions spiritually as a kind of performance art, a participation in God's ongoing mission for creation. The human being, as an artisan, can follow in the footsteps of the divine artist through this circular pattern of created order. Humanity can fulfill its cultural mandate in Genesis 1, 26 and 28, and returns glory back to God. There's a second picture. At the center of education is the state, right? Some people see that first picture. At the center of education is the people. Others will see at the center of education is the state. Some will see at the center of education is the job, right? This is all familiar to us. Even in homeschool circles, right? We do this, and at the center of it is the job. Because what's the question that we all ask, or that we all want to answer for people who question us about this? Oh, no. There are homeschoolers who get into great schools, and there are homeschoolers who get great jobs. Therefore, home education is validated because at the center of education is the job, and we can get that. Right? But what ought to be at the center of education? According to the circle of knowledge, Colossians 2, 1-3. For I want you to know how great a struggle I have for you, and for those at Laodicea, and for all who have not seen me face to face, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, to reach all the riches of full assurance of understanding and the knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. That's the center of education. Christ is at the center of education. Knowing God through his Son, Jesus Christ. Okay? We'll skip these. So, here's this first circle. Christ is at the center of education, and our goal is to know God. And when we know God, we can know things. The things that God has created. Okay? So at the center of this wheel is Christ. By the way, in the early days of Harvard, before you could graduate, you had to write a thesis on this wheel of knowledge. So every student who graduated would have to write a thesis on this wheel that I'm showing you. Okay? So we understand all things because God is their creator. This allows us also to know man, which in turn gets us to imitation. We go from God's creation to discovery. We discover things, we discover man. Man imitates God, and we see art. And the result of this is glory. Notice how the wheel works, okay? We want to know God through his Son, Jesus Christ. We look at God's creation, and we can discover what everything is and what everything means. We discover who man is, why man exists. Eventually, we mature on to imitation. Who are we imitating? We're imitating God. God's a creator, so we create things like God created things. And we do this for what purpose? To bring glory to the God who we now know. There's another layer of this. This is the encyclopedia layer. How do we go through this process? The encyclopedia, these are the steps that we go through in order to understand these things. Well, we start with form, or the basic building blocks of knowledge. From there, we go to grammar. This ought to sound familiar. You guys understand classical education, the trivium? Where do we start? With grammar. All knowledge starts with grammar, right? What do we mean by that? If I'm going to learn a language, I'm going to have to first learn grammar. But it's not just true in terms of learning a language. If I'm going to learn anything, I'm going to first have to learn the grammar. If I go into a new field, if you were working in one field and all of a sudden you had to go into another field, one of the first things that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn the grammar. You're going to have to learn what words mean. You got to learn what this thing is and what that thing is. If you go into the military, what do you got to have to do? You're going to have to learn your rates and your ranks, and you're going to have to learn, basics of your uniform, and these are your trousers, and this is all of that, right? You start with grammar. You start with what things are. It's the most basic level of knowledge. when we start talking about forms. Eventually, grammar gives way to logic. When you learn what things are, you eventually learn how to use them. You gotta know what they are in order to use them, right? If you don't know the purpose of a thing, you will eventually abuse it, right? So first, the grammar phase, you learn what things are. After that, you learn how to use them. Third phase, the rhetoric phase. And here's the trivia, right? So first I learn what to call things. Then after I learn what to call things, I learn how to use those things. And then after I've learned the basics of what to call them and how to use them, now I can actually manipulate them and get creative with them. So let's think about that in terms of words. When you learn a new language, first you just learn in vocabulary. This is a boy, this is a girl, this is a table, this is a chair, right? First you're learning vocabulary. Well, now after that you get to the second phase, and in the second phase, what do you begin to do? Well, in the second phase you begin to parse verbs and things like that, right? And learn tenses and all this sort of stuff, so that you can begin to put simple phrases together. Well, eventually, once you've passed that, now you can actually get creative and make up sentences on your own, right? Well, this is not just true of language. This is true of everything we learn. This is true of everything you teach your child. Whatever the subject is. Math. What do you do with math, right? Well, first you just have to learn what things are. There's the grammar phase, even when it comes to math. So I'll start by learning what things are. Here are numbers and integers, and these are decimals, and these are whatever. Here's the tens place, here's the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place, right? Why do I have to learn the ones place, and the tens place, and the hundreds place? Because as these things get bigger, you're gonna have to know what this is, right? Because I'm gonna put this number up here and you're gonna know that it's 245 because I've taught you the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place, so on and so forth, right? So there's the grammar phase, and then there's the logic phase. And the logic phase, you've got this stuff that you remembered by rote, and now you start doing practice with them, right? And then eventually you get to the rhetoric phase. What happens in the rhetoric phase? Well, in the rhetoric phase, I'm getting ready to tile a floor. How much tile do I need? Well, I don't know. It's that long and it's that wide. Each tile is this long and this wide. See, that's the rhetoric phase. Even with mathematics, right? This is the way you learn things. Here's what's beautiful about home education. Home education is a much more effective way to teach people to learn. Now, most home educators are not very purposeful about this process of teaching their children to learn, but even without being purposeful about this process of teaching children to learn, the result is most home educated children toward the latter part of their education are extremely independent. Anybody got anyone that just graduated yet? Toward the end, they become extremely independent, more so than children in government or in private education settings. And usually, toward the end of their education, home educated children, there's always like one or two things that they decided that they liked that they went and figured out how to do. Right? Because they've learned how to learn. Okay? They've learned this process. Folks, once you learn this process, you apply it to all knowledge. There's another phase. Eventually, we apply this to math. We apply this to science. We apply this to art. And we apply this to theology. Now, notice what just happened as we've gone around this circle. Here's what's interesting. In our culture today, most people would argue that the highest expression of learning would be what? Say it. Science. Science, right? We think that the highest expression of learning would be science. That's not true. That's not the highest expression of learning. The highest expression of learning would be theology. Why? Because our ultimate goal is to know the God who made everything. Okay? So, notice how these things follow. The outer circle follows the inner circle. So, we want to know who God is. God created the world, and because he created the world, we know what things are. We start with forms and then grammar along that side, right? Because we're learning what things are. Then we move to the logic and the rhetoric phase. In the logic and rhetoric phase, we discover man in light of the God who made him, which eventually gets us to the application of these things in math, in science, in art. Notice that here, art would be higher than science. Why? Because God's a creator. God's a creator. Just discovering what things are is not the height of our expression as human beings. We discover what they are so that we can use them to bring glory to God, right? This is the expression of art. And theology helps us how? How do I know what art brings glory to God and what art doesn't? Well, what do they say out there? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. No. Beauty is in the eye of God. God tells me what's beautiful. I don't determine what's beautiful. So even aesthetics, there is even a way to govern our definition of aesthetics. What is aesthetically pleasing? What is aesthetically displeasing? This comes to us through our theology, not through navel-gazing and just deciding what it is that we like or what's popular or what people are willing to pay the most money for. Because the fact of the matter is, the stuff people are willing to pay the most money for today, not very artistic. Amen, somebody, okay? It's garbage out there. And we've heard the stories of the person who takes the art done by their, 6-year-old and, enter it into the art contest or whatever. And some art professor somewhere is talking about, the brilliance in this piece. It's happened on a number of occasions. It's just ridiculous. That's not the way we understand art, though. Okay? This is the way we explain to our children why it's important for them to study various things. Eventually, we get to Eupraxia. Remember what we said about the purpose of all of this. What's the purpose of all of this? The purpose of all of this is that we would raise children who live lives to the glory of God, that we would raise children who would walk in righteousness and walk in truth, right? Not just acquire information. So on this first side, this is the art of organizing well. When you understand forms, you understand what things are in general. This is the art of organizing well. Secondly, grammar. This is the art of knowing well. This is the art of knowing well. Why? Because we need to learn how to learn. This is the art of knowing well. We need to learn how to categorize things in general, but we also need to learn how to learn. Thirdly, this idea of the logic phase. This is the art of thinking well. This is the art of thinking well. Fourthly, you look at the rhetoric phase. This is the art of speaking and writing well. So let's just stay on this half for a moment and think about our children who are always asking us why they have to do everything that we tell them to do, right? So we're in the grammar phase of you pick the topic. Let's just go back to math, right? Because kids push harder against that than just about anything else. They generally don't push hard against science initially when you're in the grammar phase, because when you're in the grammar phase of science, you're learning different genus and species and all this sort of stuff, and it's bugs and creeping and crawling things and all this sort of stuff, and cells and so on and so forth. They don't care why you're making them learn that. They just think it's cool. It's awesome, right? But when you're doing maths, that's a different thing. And you get a lot of pushback on that. And so, why do I need to memorize this? You keep making me do this and memorize this over and over again. Why are you making me memorize this? Well, I'm making you memorize this because you need to become adept at the art of knowing well. And this is the first phase of knowledge. Catechism. Apply this to theology proper. And it's catechism. Catechism is the grammar phase. And so you have your child memorizing the catechism. Why do I have to memorize the catechism? This is about the art of knowing well. You don't understand it yet in its fullest, but you need to know how to know things. And memorizing things like this and breaking them down to their various parts is part of the way that you become adept at knowing things. In the logic phase, this is the art of thinking well. Again, applying this to math. So now all of a sudden math is not... Your kid says, why do I need to do math? How do we answer that? Well, so all the good jobs don't go off to China. Is that our best answer? I hope it's not. I hope it's not. I hope we tell them it's very important for you to do things like math and science, because God is a God of order who has created the universe, and he's created the universe in a very orderly way. And the better you understand things like math and science, the better you are able to hear what God is saying through creation. Because the heavens declare the glory of God. Day by day, pour forth speech. The idea of speaking and writing well, of communicating what you know. It is useless and meaningless to know things and not be able to communicate them well. What good is that? Amen? Well, I mean, what good is that? You can be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you can't figure out how to take whatever it is that you've come to understand and communicate that in an effective and winsome way to other people, you will not maximize the benefit of that thing you've come to know. Right? Somehow it's got to get out. Somehow people have got to know what you've come to know. So again, the idea of speaking and writing well. Math, the art of quantifying well. The art of quantifying well. By the way, this is why you can teach computer science from a biblical worldview. Because along this wheel, computer science would fit right here. As would physics and a whole bunch of other stuff fit right here. It's the art of quantifying well. Why do we need to be able to do that? Well, if you can't quantify well, you don't get to the next phase, which is the art of analyzing. That's what science is about. Analyzing. Analyzing what? Anything. Anything. Engineering. Fits right here. See, it's interesting how, today we think that there are certain disciplines, and even on the university level, there are certain majors that are Christian in their origin, but there are others that really don't have anything to do with Christianity. We think that there's this chasm between, for example, Christianity and science. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's the biblical worldview that gives us the foundation upon which good science is to be built. Art. This is the art of imitating nature well, which is a step up from analyzing nature well, right? So maths, quantifying, if you can't quantify well, you can't analyze well. Do we get that? If you can't quantify well, you can't analyze well. You can't do science without quantifying, right? Even when it comes to the makeup of the human body, the makeup of the human body is certain percentage of this, certain percentage of that, certain percentage of the other. So guess what? In order to do that science, you have to quantify and use maths. Okay? You want to make whatever. You want to turn petroleum into diesel fuel. What do you have to do? Well, you got to do some quantifying and then do some analyzing before you can then imitate, right? The last one, theology, the art of living well. The art of living well. So in this first quadrant, what do we have and what are we emphasizing? We're emphasizing the heart, the emotion. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. And the second one, all your soul, your spirit. And the third one, with all your mind, your intellect. And the last one, with all your strength, your work. So, the interesting thing about this wheel, and you could take this and I'll try to figure out a way to get this to everybody. You take this and every subject that you will ever teach your child fits on this wheel. Everybody in this room who holds a degree, your degree fits on this wheel. And for the overwhelming majority of us, we would never have put it on this wheel in terms of, here's how this thing that I study fits in to the idea of all knowledge coming from God and all knowledge being a servant to my praise and worship of God. Every last one of us. Every one of us can put whatever you do for work, you can fit it on this wheel. And you can ask yourself the question. Number one, if you're new at what you're doing, how are you going from one phase to the other? Because that would be maturing in your knowledge and expression of whatever it is you do, right? And it doesn't matter what that thing is. Again, I mean, we could take it you could take it back to the military. You could take it into sports. Let's do that. So we take it into sports. The first thing that we would do, let's bring it into the inner circle, right? So whatever it is that I'm doing, how am I coming to know the God who made the world and his son Jesus Christ through whatever this thing is that I'm doing? And a lot of us would just be kind of like, well, actually your knee-jerk reaction is you can't really come to know God through that. You can't really come to know God through participation in some kind of sport. Really? Because one of the things that God created is man. And he gave us bodies. And our bodies function in certain ways. And our bodies function better when we use them and exert them than they do when we don't. Take the human body, stop moving, stop challenging it, and it goes to seed. Amen? Take the human body, push it to its limits, and all of a sudden, its limits get further and further and further out there. Right? Why is that? Well, we start there on that first side, that form and grammar. You know, God created your body, He created it a certain way, and then we get to more discovery of the body and who man is, the logic and the rhetoric. What would the logic and the rhetoric look like? Well, the first thing is the grammar phase. What is my body? What are the parts of my body? What are the parts of my body that I use in whatever this particular sport is? So what are the parts of my body that I need to strengthen in order to be better at this particular sport? What are the parts of my body that are jeopardized by this sport? Because it may be dangerous to certain parts of my body. If that's the case, then I need to learn how to protect those parts of my body. By the way, there are a lot of sports that we play where we wear pads, right? You figure that out in this logic and rhetoric phase, okay? Because people used to go out there and play soccer, football without shin guards. How many times you got to, two guys kick their shins together and get a hairline fracture before somebody goes, hey, we should probably put something right there, right? So, there's that discovery. Then there's the imitation, right? So, how do we go from math, quantifying, science, analyzing, art, imitating? What does that look like in terms of your sport? Anybody? Huh? What? Yeah, it could be tactics. What else? Math could be aerodynamics. Let me give you an example of this. So in high school, I was in track and field. And I was in high school in the mid to late 1980s. And there's a guy by the name of Dick Fosbury. I used to high jump. Before Dick Fosbury, everybody high jumped the same way. They approached the bar and they went over the bar forward and rolled. Dick Fosbury, through the application of mathematics, physics, science, figured out that if you approached the bar, making what he finally figured was a J, where you jumped over backwards as opposed to going over forward, you could jump a whole lot higher. Within one Olympic Games, people were done with jumping forward, and everybody was doing the Fosbury flop. Because Dick Fosbury figured out a way to do that thing more in line with the way God made the body. Do you see what I'm saying here? Okay? So even, again, we're talking about something in sport that you just wouldn't even talk about usually in terms of this. It's kind of like this war between, being, if you're a really good Christian parent and then your children are going to be involved in any sports and they're going to read the Bible and do more spiritual things. Understand something. God made our bodies. And if you understand the body properly, you go through all this stuff on the first half, it doesn't take long to figure out that when we use our bodies, and when we push our bodies to the limit, they're more fit, they're more energetic, they last longer, right? And we can get more production out of them, okay? So sport helps us to figure out how we can push those limits. It used to be believed that man could not run a 4-minute mile, that his heart would explode. Now they do it in high school. Right? One guy does it at Oxford, and all of a sudden, 4-minute miles just started coming from everywhere, right? Okay, all right. Now, then we've got to push it all the way up to the top, which is theology. How would we apply that in terms of theology, which is the art of living well?
Being healthy.
What?
Healthy choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Being healthy. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So how then do we take care of our bodies properly? How then do you see what I'm saying? Because this is stewardship. So folks, if we can take something like PE, physical education, and run it around this wheel, just being introduced to it, and figure out how ultimately we can get from form all the way back over to theology, and see how this can be done to the glory of God, you see how we can do that with anything else. Give me another.
Excellent.
Give me another. No, give me a subject. History. Okay, fine. History. So let's start with history. Okay? Let's take it around this, first the inner wheel. All right? First, what does history begin with? God and creation. And Him creating all things. So when did He create all things? How did He create all things? And the discovery of things that He created. Understanding man in light of God and His creation of all things. Okay? So let's go now and talk about form. What form is history going to take? Facts, timelines, eras, right? Stuff like that, right? So now, grammar. What are those basics that we're going to have to memorize? Yes. They're just going to have, right? Like it or not, you're going to have to cram some dates in your head that aren't going to make any sense for you. And there may be ways that you know, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But you're going to have to cram some things. That's the grammar phase. But you've got to do that, right? You've got to do that. Now, eventually, you come down to the logic phase and the rhetoric phase, okay? So the logic phase, I've memorized all these dates, and I've memorized all these events, and I've memorized them in various parts of the world, right? What happens in the logic phase when I'm dealing with history? Exactly. Well, this happened around that time. Hey, this also happened around that time, right? Okay. Rhetoric phase. Now what am I going to be doing with history?
Lessons from history.
Yeah. Lessons from history, and even warnings today based on lessons from history. We've seen this before, right? Okay? And in order to do that rightly, okay, now we're no longer just sort of basic historians. We're not just passing history tests anymore. We're going to have to apply some maths. Because we're going to have to be able to quantify things well, right? What's a way now that history becomes, more complex, and we're actually applying maths in order to quantify things well and apply them to our knowledge of history and our assessment of history?
Decades, centuries.
Yeah, but that's still, we're getting back to the more basic stuff. We're past all that now.
Days and things?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Statistics.
Could be. Statistics for what?
People dying from plague, migrations of people, percentages of...
Thank you. You see?
Predictions.
You see, now we've gotten, yeah. But do you see the difference between that application of maths in the more complicated area and kind of the grammar phase type of stuff, right? All right. And in science, I think we've already addressed some of that. Now, art. Art. What am I going to do with that?
Learning from history.
Let's see the art of the kids.
And providence, right? At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to understand all of history. Again, going back to that center, because remember in the middle, this is all about knowing God through His Son Jesus Christ, the God who created the world. And so I want to be able to understand how all of history has been shaped and formed by God's providential hand and His providential work, because that's how I'm going to be able to bring praise and glory and honor to God through the study of history. Okay? All right? And then we get to that last one, theology, the art of living well. I think that's already been said. Okay? This is the application of that even to the way that we consider ourselves today and move into the future. Okay? Do you guys see this? Okay? This is a real, tangible way that you can answer a question that most of us as homeschool parents just really can't answer. And that is, okay, how am I to give my child a Christian education? I know that I'm supposed to give my child a Christian education. And for most of us, what that means is I'm supposed to do all the other stuff that everybody else does the same way they do it, but I'm to have Bible. Right? We're supposed to do Bible. Everything else we do the same way everybody else does, but we do Bible. Right? Well, how is your math and your science, Christian? Well, we use apologia, so that makes it no. From a more fundamental level. Why is apologia? And I just sort of pull that one. Why is that more appropriate than some other science? Can you use another science and fit it into this? Or do we always have to have people who are spoon feeding us? This is the way that this is Christian. See, when we understand this, we actually have more liberty. Right? We actually have more liberty. And sometimes it can be a challenge. Okay? But folks, if we can put sports and physical education along this wheel, both on the inside of the wheel and the outside of the wheel, and understand how we can even pursue that to the glory of God, and then we can take math, and then we can take history, and whatever else we wanted, we can put anything else we wanted on here. Okay? We can take military science. We'll do that one. That'll be the last one. Okay? Take the military and put it on there. Military, no, because that's all about war and it's all about killing, and there's no way that you can run that around this thing and end up over here with the glory of God. Is it a subject? Then it needs to be taken captive for God's glory. Can it be? Show me. Come on. You got to do it. Don't just tell me. And the reason I want us to do this together is, number one, I want to show you the usefulness of this, right? But secondly, I want you to leave this session with something that you can go home and tangibly apply. Not even just to your home education. You can tangibly apply this to how you feed your family. Culinary arts. You can put that on there. But again, we're in the military now. All right? All right. So we're talking about form and grammar. What are we doing?
Strategy.
Strategy's way down there. Huh? What's an army? What's a navy? What's an air force? Right? Why do we have those? Who are officers? Who are enlisted? Why do we have officers and enlisted people? What are the rates and ranks? Right? Just basic stuff. What do they wear? What do they do? So, and if you're in the military, right, you're learning how to stand at attention, stand at ease. You're learning how to march, right? You're learning different paces at which to march. How about that? Well, you're doing all that stuff, and what are you learning there? Uniformity. Why is it important to learn uniformity? Why is it important to learn order and structure and command structure? Right? Well, eventually, you get higher and you start getting to the logic and rhetoric phase. Now you understand that, in order for a military to function, in order for a military to operate, that there has to be this command structure and there has to be order, okay? Because here's what you're going to have to do. Everything is about command and control, right? So we understand that. Eventually, we move over here to the math and science phase of it. How many of your people do you put on the sea? How many of your people do you need in the air? How many of the people do you need on the land? Kind of depends on where you are, who you're fighting, where you're fighting, what you're fighting for, right? All of that stuff, okay? But again, let's go to the center. Can you bring that to the center of the wheel? Notice I started on the outside, because the outside is the easy one when it comes to the military, right? I mean, once you sort of break through and do that, right? You can see how we get all the way to math and then the science of it, and then even the art of it, right? There's absolutely an art to it. Some of the greatest discoveries in the history of the world have been the result of wars. Much of what we've done with flight, think about that. Much of what we've done with our seafaring, think about that, okay? Much of it has been because people had to defend themselves against other people and repel enemies, right? Much of it has been because of that, okay? Huge planes that carry a lot of people, the military needed that before commercial flight needed it. Right? Commercial flight merely benefited from what the military had to push the envelope and do in order to move troops from one place to another. But again, that's the easy stuff. Let's get back in the middle. So we're talking about knowing God through his son, Jesus Christ. This God who created the world and all the things in it. This God who created man in his own image.
You need to know the ethics of the thing, or else you'll end up, you won't know the difference.
Okay, all right. Bring that down more basic. What are the ethics of that? Why would we need any sort of military structure based on this?
To protect the innocent.
To protect the innocent. To protect the innocent.
Because we're in spiritual warfare.
Because we are in spiritual warfare, aren't we? We are in spiritual warfare.
We're assuming there isn't such a thing as a just war, and it's just a fight to kill for certain reasons.
Say again?
You're assuming that there is such a thing as a just war.
You're assuming that there is such a thing as a just war. Yeah, there's always going to be someone who's in sin in a war. There's always going to be, everyone's a sinner, but not everything that everyone does is sinful, right? Just because everyone's a sinner doesn't mean that everything that everyone does is a sinner. But what I'm saying is when you have aggression like that, Especially when you talk about on that level. You're generally not going to have two people with righteous motives who end up at war with one another. You're going to have at least one who is exercising some unrighteous motives towards someone else who then is defending themselves. At least, if not both, who are exercising that. Because we live in a fallen world.
So who is the worst sinner and determine that person should die?
Say again.
Who would judge who is the worst of the two sinners and determine?
Who would judge who's the worst of the two sinners? God would. Yeah, God would. That's assuming that you're dealing with two groups who are both acting sinfully and not one who is acting sinfully and someone else who's defending themselves against those sinful actions. But yeah, God would ultimately be the one who would judge that. Because God's the one who judges all people's sin. Yeah.
So without the law of Christ as it relates to warfare, standing armies, how to fund standing army, you're in a moral quagmire of subjectives.
Yeah, but see, that's another thing, right? Because people haven't always agreed that you should have standing armies. The founders of my country, they argued that you shouldn't have standing armies. That we should have a militia, right? And well-armed public, right? Not a standing army. Because Benjamin Franklin, the problem with standing armies is people always feel the temptation to use them, right? But again, that goes back here too. Okay? So the idea that man is made in the image of God, that man, is to be treated with dignity and respect, the idea that the weak are to be protected, these are things that we can get and we can understand here, and they would inform our application, right, of these truths. Not even on even before you got to that level, it would be down to the personal level, right? To the personal level of self-defense, okay? And the Bible makes it very clear that self-defense is not murder. God teaches Israel very specifically in a number of different places the difference between someone, for example, who kills another person and it is murder, and someone who kills another person and it's self-defense, right? So yeah, he does not teach that all killing is a violation of his command. So again, but all of that would have to be applied right here to this circle. Now, take all of these things that we just did, okay? And we all see now, we get it now, right? We understand how the wheel works. You can take anything now and apply it to the wheel, and you'll get better at it as you go along. But think about this. Even the questions here, these much more complicated questions about war and, whether it's going to be just and whether it's ethical and whether this, whether that, da-da-da-da. Now, as believers, we can go to the text and we can come here and we can deal with that. But we live in a world where people who have been blessed beyond measure because of this kind of thinking now find it outdated and obsolete, and we're trying to do all of this without that circle of knowledge. This is what's wrong with modern education. And this is why we're seeing such horrible fruit all over the place. Because we do not have these governing principles. And this ultimate truth at the center of it all. Do you see? It's one thing for us to say, boy, there's some of these things that would be more complicated and we'd have to, dig a little bit more into the nuances of the text and, so on and so forth. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to say there's no standard. So, for example, we've got people fighting wars today, none of whom acknowledge an absolute moral standard. None of them. Well, let me take that back. Because ISIS would have an absolute moral standard, right? They would have an absolute moral standard. And they would absolutely go to the text to defend everything that they're doing, okay? But other than that, when you talk about in the West, you talk about the UN, you talk about the EU, you talk about the US, you talk about all of these people have rejected the very possibility of an absolute moral standard and are making statements like, we must defeat evil. Do you see? You see? Okay. So, this is very important, all right? And when we're thinking about educating our children and thinking about giving them a Christian education, I think it's very important. Is this the only way that we can think through this? No, there are other models of this. I don't think there are any as thorough as this one, right? Even the trivium itself is only a portion of this wheel, right? It's not even the trivium's not even the whole first half of the wheel, okay? So yes, there are other ways that people are trying to approach and sort of synthesize what it means to do Christian education. But we don't have anything that comes close to what the Puritans did here. Okay.
That's the Puritan model.
Yeah, it's the Puritan model. Yeah, Harvard was based on the Puritan model.